excited to introduce our third speaker of the night, Saadiq Spears. Saadiq is currently a New York Collegiate Institute and Opportunities Program Scholar in his junior year at NYU, studying MCC, Media, Culture, and Communications, with a focus in business and media studies. He is originally from Poughkeepsie, New York, but reps his Trinidadian, Puerto Rican, and Black roots heavily. He continues to progress his work as a public speaker and marketer by executive producing his own podcast, King's Corner, as well as his YouTube channel, Saadiq Thinks. Tonight, Saadiq will give his insightful perspective on the changing nature of careers, as well as advice for our generation, Gen Z. Let's welcome Saadiq.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you. I like that call to action. Hello, my name is Saadiq Spears, and today I'll be talking about Generation Z. Gen Z, my generation. Gen Z, the job hopping generation. When I say job hopping, that can be received in a positive or a negative way. But it's just a fact. Gen Z is the job hopping generation, even when a master's degree is attained. Some may chalk this up to the fact that Gen Z might just be too restless. I don't like to stay in a place too long. Some may chalk this up to the fact that Gen Z likes to compete for competitive pay, and I like to get paid more. But a prominent and a leading factor is that Gen Z feels like the work they are entering isn't meaningful to them. That's a scary factor to me. Today, I want to tell y'all the story of what makes my work meaningful to me. But it all stems from this question of what do you want to be? I'm going to get back to this question, but I want you to think on this as I'm going throughout my story. And my story starts within quarantine. In quarantine, I was stumbling upon two different passions. On the left side, you would see is my PTS logo, my former podcast of Pillars to Society. On the right side, you would see two charts of Facebook and Square, and this is indicative of my stock market passion. So two passions. One passion of podcasting, the second passion of the stock market. And in the middle you would see it's an amalgamation of my Snapchat memories at the time. And that was because that's what my days looked like. In the morning I'd wake up at 8 a.m. during quarantine. I put in one of my podcasts. I'd run to the gym. I'd be back by 9:30 with CNBC on for the stock market opening bell. That is what my day consisted of. Nobody was telling me, Saadiq, you gotta wake up, make sure you're there for that stock market bell. Nah. Nobody, people did say that I should start a podcast, but nobody made me start the podcast. This was organic discipline. This was organic passion. This is what got me up in the morning. And since it got me up in the morning, I had to figure out and narrow down exactly what I wanted to do, because this was pre-college. So I had to come in and figure out my major. And I'm stuck between these two different passions. When I got to school here at NYU, I was admitted into the Liberal Studies program, LS. So my introduction when I came to people, and I introduced myself as a first year, hi, my name is Saadiq, and I go to Liberal Studies. That was school. And it'd be as opposed to like one of my friends, Janine, she would introduce herself. Hi, my name is Janine. I go to Steinhardt School of Education, studying nutrition and diet studies. So it's a little bit of a different pressure when you try to figure out your major, because you see one of your friends, you see somebody latch on to their passion, and they get to hit the ground running. It's a little bit different for me. I had to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I might have faced some familiar pressure where, I'm stuck between business and podcasting, or stuck between business and media, and, that familiar pressure is like, go with the money, and, I like money, so of course, that's what I chose. I chose business. As you can see in my spiffy suit, I hit the ground running my first year. Hitting the ground running, there was not faculty, advisors, students. There was not nobody I didn't have their contact information for to leverage me to get into NYU Stern, the business school. because that's what I was focused on. I wanted to get into business school, and I was going to find any which way that I could to leverage myself. Later down that year, I got into the Early Insights program for Morgan Stanley. This Early Insights program set me up to be able to intern, or to be able to interview for a position next summer. So my first year, I'm feeling all this professional success. I made my family proud, I made myself proud, I made my friends proud, but I still was yearning for a little bit more. That's when I bought my Lumix G7 camera. Now this camera is my baby. I got to see a different side of myself. It reminded me of the podcasting days I had in quarantine. This allowed me to not only see myself as a storyteller, but it's a little bit more intimate side that I didn't really get from that business path. You know, I got to speak and look at myself a little bit more introspectively. And that's when I started my YouTube channel, Saadiq Ranks. When I started this YouTube channel, this is one of my prominent videos in the beginning. And this allowed me to kind of see a different side of media for me. Media was something that I was starting to fall in love with. You know, it wasn't just podcasting anymore. It was just more of like, all right, I'm seeing myself as a creative. And that creative side, I wasn't feeling as much until I bought this camera. It ultimately allowed me to take a class within media cultures and communications in my first 2 years. And after taking a couple of classes, I decided to completely switch my major to media cultures and communications. Now I want to pause here. Judging by the trajectory of my story, you know, a lot would assume that I completely pivoted to media. And as some other employers would, when they're reading my first couple of lines in my resume, they'd expect that as well. That is until you start reading my long list of experiences on my resume. Not only am I GQ President, Gentleman of Quality on this campus, I'm a prominent student leader. I'm in multiple organizations. I'm in a professional development organization, Institute of Responsible Citizenship. I'm in a bunch of things. I host the King's Corner podcast. I host my own YouTube channel, Saadiq Ranks. And I was just on a panel for TikTok. So I do a lot. But I've also interned at Morgan Stanley last summer. And interning at Morgan Stanley last summer, it shows on my resume that it's ever changing. My path is ever changing. But yet I'm still in the limbo between these two different passions of media and business. And in my first year, I chose business, hit the ground running, as you can see in my spiffy suit. In my second year, I chose media, switching my major to media cultures and communications. And in my third year now, I'm choosing both. Both, as you can see from these images, you know, looks and means a lot. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of heart, you know, it's late nights, it's doing a lot of different things. But it's what makes my story meaningful to me. It's what makes this meaningful to me. Choosing both is looking at media and business in an abstract way. Wherever I go into business, I take media with me. Wherever I go into media, I take business with me. It makes me think of a story within my internship, and when I started my internship, it was pretty rocky. You know, like it was hard to get the lingo at Morgan Stanley just because it's a pretty hard, I guess, culture to get adjusted to. But one trade idea that got me and got my footing together and got me confident was actually a trade idea on a media basket. So that had to deal with like Netflix, Disney, and whatnot. And this trade idea, because they could see it lit up within my eyes when I spoke about some media, this trade idea is what got my footing at my internship. This footing got me confident. This footing allowed me to see that I want to be stuck between these two different passions. It's not no more looking at the question of what do you want to be, but it's now looking at, all right, what would I like to do? What can I do? So I started looking at it in an interdisciplinary approach. But I learned this from one of my favorite podcasts, which is Earn Your Leisure. This podcast is ran by Rashad Bilal and Troy Millings, and it's a business-centered podcast. So it kind of gets me up to speed for the stuff that I need to know. But they tell their business story and business concepts through a hip-hop and a black culture perspective. It helps to bridge the gap of understanding for me, so it's a little bit more digestible and legible. And this interdisciplinary approach that they take to this podcast is how I kind of framework my interdisciplinary approach that I take to the professional workplace. I want to stop looking at the question of what do you want to be? And I want to look more at the question of what do you want to do? What do you want to be places your mind in a rudimentary box. It makes the student that's coming into their school looking at it as a stronghold within their mind of like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? What am I going to be? I want to start looking at the question of what do you want to do? It helps me, and it makes it a little bit more meaningful for me to be in between these two different passions versus trying to pick something, hit the ground running, and at the climax, not liking it at all. As I start to conclude, I want to urge Gen Z and then all the influences of Gen Z, so kind of everybody in this room and anybody that could be watching, to look at the workforce and the workplace in an interdisciplinary approach and take it in an abstract way. Because that's what I'm doing. It's not necessarily that I'm not doing business. It's not necessarily that I'm not doing media. It's the fact that I'm trying to find different ways that these intersect, just like that trade idea did for me. It made it click. And making that click, I would argue that's got me the confidence to make sure that I would get that returning offer. But it doesn't stop just there. You know, it starts with me podcasting, it starts with me doing my internship, but this is a relationship between these two different passions. And I want to reflect that relationship for all of y'all. I want to conclude with a message to Gen Z, Generation Z, my generation. To love what you do, be graceful with your journey, because you could have it all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saadiq. That was really powerful, and you're a natural born speaker.